Hello, everyone. It is the October, I almost said September, October Author Jam. So I'm really happy to be here and welcome Ryan, Margaret, Carol, Yesham, and any other guests that pop in to see what's on your mind and what things we can support you with. So, with that said, I don't know if anyone has anything to jump in with right off the bat. Anything happening going on?
Well, there's a little secret, I think, happening between Margaret Carol and I. So maybe we would have the same thing to share. But I'm curious because I have not seen or heard Yesham for a while. If you're invited to bring your heart and mind spirit into the circle, or you just let us just go. So,
No, just go. Just go. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I haven't been around. It's been really, really busy, but it's lovely to be here. So I'm all ears.
mm. Well, based on and where I am feeling right now is with the project that Carol kind of put out there to connect Margaret's work in Painful Business to um, a larger scale. And I'm really curious about how we might blend multiple modalities from the author base here into bioregionally appropriate contexts and different frames of folk. And it for me, and what I just want to bring into the space is just this spirit of hopefulness and excitement with that particular project. And I'm curious to see where that goes.
Well, and Yashim, just for your benefit, I don't know that you've met Margaret. I don't, were you? Yeah, so I want to do
Ooh.
that. And then is there like, the 2 minutes, even though it's horribly hard to fit 2 minutes of this big thing, this huge thing that would help Yashim understand where Ryan's going. So that might be helpful. So
Yeah, no,
not
this
that you have a
just
time
to
limit,
say,
but
yeah, just to say, I'm really interested in hearing that. And hello, Margaret.
Nice to meet you.
So I am going to be a participant observer, but have to set the platform. Margaret and I had this big conversation day before yesterday about how both of us are a little bit in awe of the synchronicities that are happening. And I couldn't have wished for a better next step because I believe that I introduced Yesham to Margaret, not in body, but in spirit. And this is a core group to make what we're talking about, the little secret, which is absolutely not a secret. Margaret has been very open about what this goal is. So I can't tell you how excited I am. And Yeshim, over to you. I just can't imagine. I'm going to watch Margaret's face.
For me, I like the word secret. It's just that there is something gripping about it. So yeah, I'm curious. Oh,
No,
somebody
you
else
have
is
to.
joining.
Oh,
Sorry, what do you?
Gil.
Oh, sorry. What did you? So you asked me to do something?
Yes, I asked you to give your more than elevator speech so that
Okay,
Margaret
okay.
can understand where you're coming from.
Mm.
And Gil, we're having a conversation that's based on a very small subgroup that has come together because of the author. Oh, here comes Patricia. Oh, goodness. Hi, Patricia.
great.
This couldn't be better. I think we need, Lisa, I think you need to start differently now that Gil and Patricia have joined.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think we have to be more traditional.
yeah. Well, essentially, we had started out with a group that I know with Ryan, and I'm not sure, do we need background here real quick? Okay. There, thanks, Geshem. That have been working on something, but we've got the additions of Gil and Patricia. So
You can
if
keep
you,
going with whatever you were working on. I'll listen.
well,
No,
and
no,
go ahead. Sorry,
no,
go
I
ahead, Carol.
think it's really important for everybody to know who everybody is,
Right.
because Gil and Patricia come with very valid input to the secret.
Yeah. Well, essentially what I was trying to get into was just Margaret and Yesham having come in prior to you, Gil and Patricia, was just a little piece of where Yesham comes from, as well as what we've been talking with Margaret about for a couple of the last jams. And then the similar though for you, Gil and Patricia. Now, Patricia, you were in the last jam and had met Margaret and talked and everything. So there is some familiarity there, but that would be probably helpful. So Yesham, as far as like, you know, the work you do, right? In conflict management and such, and that could be informative to Margaret for sure.
Sure. Hello, Patricia and Gilmore as well. Hello, welcome. I'm Yesham Harris from London, joining you from London. I'm a conflict mediator and starter and manager of difficult conversations. I love difficult conversations. That's what I do. So I have worked in the arena of international conflicts for many years, and this included my specialism and my passion, which is an overused word, but I'll use it anyway because it is a true passion, is to bring extremists together. It could be extremism in terms of terrorism, or extremists in terms of you know, I would call anyone who has a very strong point as an extremist. And I don't know about you, but we all have the capacity to be extremists in our head. We don't have to act on it, but we all have the capacity. And I learned many things in working in war zones. And what I increasingly understand and have been understanding is the parallels between what I see in war zones and in organizations. Also in family conflicts, and even inside ourselves, the conflict, because we can all be conflicting inside. There's an extremist inside all of us. There's a saboteur inside all of us. There's a mature person inside all of us. So I think what I saw in these conflict-ridden geographies is a set of patterns which apply to everyone. I also saw that some of the tools which are used in these highly strung, highly tense environments are much more pragmatic than the ones we use in organizations. And with family, I will not really talk about family mediation because that's not my interest area. I respect it, but it's not my area. So what I've been doing was I've developed 7 lessons from what I saw. There are many lessons, but I put them under 7 categories of lessons I learned from war zones and how I can help with organizations. So in the last 3 years, I've been helping organizations with those, running workshops, being consultants, and I have big conglomerates, I have small businesses, big businesses, and United. Currently, for example, I'm working with United Nations. In 2 weeks' time, I'm going to Uzbekistan with Organization of Security Council Europe. So it's a very wide range of organizations, but mainly either international NGOs or businesses, private sector or public sector. I don't know if that is sufficient for now. Any questions are very welcome, but it's very good to be here with all of you.
Great, great. Thanks, Yesham. And there's such a rich OD history with everyone in the room, but more recently, Margaret joined in the jams for some support in her most recent efforts. So, Margaret, I don't know if you want to jump in and, how much background for Yesham, but I think the primer for what you've been working on is important.
Okay, thank you so much. So thank you, Yesham. So I'm retired for 5 years now, and I've been working in conflict resolution since 1992. So that's definitely has been a passion of mine. And at the end of my career, I was looking at forces that polarize local communities, and that's what I specialized in before I quit working. And then I'm now applying it to some newfound knowledge about my family here. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. And I found out that I had 100 years of people here that I didn't know about, family. They were all slave traders. And so I've written a book that came out in March, and we're using the book as a way to help my story and art that is taken from the newspaper as a people that my family sold, as a way to create a way to bridge the racial divide. And so that's in a nutshell what we're working on. And so for me, that's a change process. And so having known this group for years, connected in different ways, I just decided to come, and there seems to be interest. Was that fast enough?
I don't know that it had to be fast. I just did want to get everyone in. So you can certainly add where you'd like. And here comes Dave. So, Patricia, Gil, do you want to jump in and say hello?
I'll say hello. Well, I think that's great, Margaret. We in the U.S. need to embrace our history and try to do so with as much honesty as possible. And it's certainly not something that we've done a very good job of collectively. I think of Germany as a place that is much better at it than the United States. Pretty much every town I've been to in Germany has statues of Jewish people being herded onto trains and so on. And so they keep their history right in front of them as a reminder of what they don't want to be. So I think that's wonderful. I'm curious, Yesham, if we can like see your 7 principles. Is there like a simple document that could be shared? I'd love to see
Sorry,
them.
yeah, sure. I mean, yes, I can do a little. I mean, I can tell you a few things about it. There's a book. I mean, I'm in the process of writing a book now. There's also a blog which I have not put it yet anywhere, but I can also share that with you. These are so let me just open
Yesham,
something, just 1 second. Yeah.
Even if you get that to me, I can make sure it goes to everybody too.
Yeah.
So yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, it is. I have the 7 lessons in front of me, but that will take a bit of time. So I don't know. Maybe others may want to come and say. I mean, basically, my answer is I am more than happy to share anything I know or anything I produce in my head. And for the latecomers, what I was saying was I worked in international conflict for nearly 2 decades now, and I just accumulated some lessons to implement to organizations. So that's the idea. And in the last few years, I've been actually helping organizations which really work beautifully, I have to say. So that's the idea. So yeah, I will take time, I can tell you, but maybe others may want to say other things. So I will stop for the moment, but very happy to share anything you like.
Cool.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave.
Yeah,
So,
you're muted, but go ahead, Patricia.
yeah, I'm Patricia Neal with Center for Purposeful Leadership. in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm very interested in this conversation. Already this morning, have been talking about conversations and settings of accessibility, because some of what we're talking about has to do with inclusion. Well, everything it has to do with inclusion and accessibility, not just physical, but people feeling welcome into a conversation that's going to a conversation or a setting that will be will bring them to someplace new that they weren't before. So often the goal of our work is that it isn't to reinforce what we already know, but to create the conditions for something new to emerge by developing either a shared or collective wisdom, or perspectives or opinions or whatever it is, to let something new emerge that wasn't there before. It's not necessarily the middle, but it's a new ground to build on. So I'm complete.
Thanks, Patricia. Dave, were you going to try to jump in? Just wanted to check in.
You're on mute, Dave.
Yeah, yep, you're on mute. Well, hopefully you can work on that.
There.
There.
I never use my phone for this because for some reason, this desktop has decided not to communicate with the internet. So here I am, and sorry, it's a lesson in practice, because when you're used to having something work without problems, 5 minutes before the hour, I click on, ready for a nice visit with you guys, and nothing. And I didn't change my computer since last night. So what do? So I got underneath, crawled under this desk, and got cramps in my legs and almost couldn't get out. And then finally fiddle around, nothing. So I remembered that some people come in on their phones, but I've rarely done that in 5 years of Zooming. So I could not find how to get out of mute. And now you're glad that I didn't, because now I'm talking too much. But anyway, if you really want to keep in the flow of things and keep pursuing results, you have to try this, that, and the other thing. And if those 3 things don't work, you try the 4th thing. So that'll be my next wait a minute.
So, like, Carol, Ryan back in to add.
What I'm thinking, I'm curious about how Margaret, from what you've heard from each of the folks who are here, and what their practices are, again, going back to what Dave says, how might we apply each of these practices and blends of them in the areas where we are, such as you've done in South Carolina, to engage with this, the big theme. I think we're talking about the theme of racial reckoning. And what is what are the ways that we can blend what we do either with each other or create new ways to engage in this question in more inclusive and broader and scalable ways? So that's my curiosity. And when I see so many people in this room, the spider sense starts, and to wonder how each person may play with the other in this theme. So.
Well, I would say that, Patricia, it's good to see you again. And what stood out for me was talking about using conversation, because for me, that's the way of having people where they're proximate and they can begin to establish a relationship, and in a place where you said that they feel like others that may not have been accessible in the past are accessible in the present. So that really stood out for me, and for Yasham, it's definitely what your seminar that we're going to get after the Zoom call today. Because I almost think of some of the things that are as serious as what we're doing with racial reckoning is almost like a war zone. It's feeling more like a war zone given the fact that we've got a presidential election coming up. So it feels more that way to me. So yeah, how about what stood out for you, Ryan?
What, again, just the theme of, I think exactly where you're talking about, and that the extremes of different ideologies in different regions, and what has come for the folks who are white in Southwest Ohio, like where I am, and the issues that we have here may not be related to the slave trade as your family was. But what I wrote down is that in each of these regions, I'm sure there's a history of whether it was from Jim Crow or Reconstruction, that there are histories. Where did those divides start? And if there are folks in those areas, and that's when I was thinking about what we talked about. I'm thinking, who in my region might have some genealogy in history in their past that they can explore and have a kind of artistic expression of that to invite conversation, much as you did in South Carolina. So again, there'd be someone, I'm sure, in Minneapolis and in the Northlands, that there's a different kind of reckoning in between extreme groups, and again, how these groups can come together and groups across regions can come together. That just so many different ways that came up to me, and the local stories and the depth of that story that came for you. I think there are lots of deep stories that can be unearthed and used to unite. So that's what came up to me first from that.
So if I could just build on that, going back to Minneapolis, because I actually lived there. As I told y'all, I lived there for 4 winters, 44 months. I love the place. I couldn't handle the gray. There was so much that I learned in Minneapolis, where I think that Charleston can be a center point for change in racial reckoning, and I feel that Minneapolis has that potential as well as a place in this country, because of the aftermath of Mr. Floyd's demise, and I know that I was surprised when I lived up there how segregated Minneapolis was. Of course, that's 25 years ago, so that might be different now. I think, I don't know, I hadn't really thought about this before, but I really think that Minneapolis and Charleston have a way to bring history to the present together. I don't know what you think about that, Patricia, but that's just something that's sort of a thread for me.
Did you want me to respond, or do you want just to keep the conversation going? I think it's an interesting premise, and I'll just say this. Most people have moved on from George Floyd, and it is still a very open wound here. It's a sore, and it oozes almost every day. And a lot of people have forgotten about it. But if you live within, if you within a lot of conversation circles, and if you choose not to be segregated, it's still very alive and unresolved. So, and we've also had Dante Wright, Philandro Castile. We've had a number of unfortunate murders deaths in the Twin Cities. And, you know, healing is starting, but it's still very, very alive. We have not moved on. So I'm complete.
Well, I'll just add that I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm very much a lover of Kurt Lewin, and so I wrote a book not too long ago about the history of prejudice in the United States. And so just speaking about the context of it, that is the roots, I think, go all the way back to class warfare in Great Britain and the whole idea by Sir Francis Bacon of dividing and conquering in order to control the poor. They applied that in Virginia, the Virginia colony, and they used race as the way of doing it. And that's sort of, I think, the unique history of the United States is that we've never recovered from that. They turned the poor indentured servants that were light-skinned into the overseers of the African slaves that were coming in. And so we just have this long history of using race as a means of really what I think is class warfare. And it's still going on today, the dividing and conquering as a way to get elected, the scapegoating of whoever they think they can scapegoat successfully. In this case, immigration is the big tool to scare people, attempt to scare people into supporting their, the attempt to gain power. And so that's the history in the US that I think is still with us. It's not really just history. And we never figured out how to change the narrative amongst the majority to just thinking about how can we all get along, even, not demifying the 1%, because there's a lot of people that have money that are really want things to be better. So, but that's it for me. That's the root cause in this country, turning class, using race as a means of staying in power. Autocracies actually really deep in the roots of this country. And I hope conversation will help change that.
I don't know.
Did you have more, Dave?
Am I still on mute?
No, we can hear you. You're good.
Oh boy. Getting paranoid about technology here. Well, I've lived 8 decades and up through the strata of whatever racism existed in the 40s and 50s when I was a kid. And then through the 60s, Detroit riots. I was going to university in Michigan at that time. So I'm just kind of running up through the rings in my tree. And the question is entering into a conversation. I can't remember many opportunities for constructive conversation other than what I could do personally. But institutionally, what we tried to do at my university in the 90s and early 2000s, we tried to create some conversations across campus within faculty, students. I remember the person who very ambitious about it, who tried to lead it. And I say tried because we might get people in a room for an hour, and then the watches come out, and oh gee, look, it's time to run. So you made these sort of presentations of self to say, here I am. Now, what's really fascinating, I hope, is that one of the very first conversations that I ever heard about at my university was led by Kurt Lewin in the 50s in a room near where my office used to be. And I used to come back to that and say, at one time we had one of these so-called cross-campus, cross-disciplinary conversations in that very room. It was called Founders Hall. And I remember saying, hey, this is where the Department of Education in Connecticut brought together people from different backgrounds and races. And they spent 3 or 4 days with the facilitation of a gifted person named Kurt Lewin. And it did help integrate our schools in Connecticut. But where's the next Lewin? And someone looked at me and said, well, why don't you be the next Lewin? And I said, no, I don't have that history in my life to see what it's like to be deeply discriminated against as he was. So anyway, sorry to ramble.
I don't think you're rambling.
It's not a ramble.
Yeah.
Never is.
I think human beings can help each other. It doesn't have to be that you were in a minority group or a group that was discriminated against to help create conversations.
Yeah.
That would be the same dividing. You know, to
Yeah.
say only certain people can help and others can't, and so on. That's
Well, that was sort of
Yeah.
the claim, and this is the 90s. The claim was unless you're black, you really don't have any right to be in this conversation talking about black people. I remember that, and I did feel discriminated against for that reason. It's like, what? But that was going on. And then later when we were recruiting,
still going on, David.
yeah, when we were recruiting faculty, every search committee had to have a black person on it. And we had 2 people like that in my department, management. And I really felt badly. They would go and be on the search committee, but they knew they were there just because they were black. And they were both very gifted, you know, had higher education up the arms, but they were looked at more in terms of checking the boxes. So that became the the kind of fake need to integrate our faculty over the years. I guess I'm a little jaded.
I want to pop in there a little bit because I'm hearing a theme about the intervention strategy, right? To go, let's start with large group, and let's get large groups together, and have a like an open space type conversation where we bring those kind of constellations together. And I know that, Margaret, from your experience in Charleston, and what we're kind of inviting for this project, for those who want to join it, is this go slow to go fast process of, and I think there's also, I think I put down start small and get big, you know, start slow and small and get larger and deeper with these smaller groups and create the trust and the grace in those small groups. And then you can hopefully then convene folks who can see each other and trust each other to bring those together. And I'm wondering how that pattern showed up for you in Charleston and how that might apply to the situation that is today.
Well, when we ran the Illumination project to build citizen and police relationships based on trust, it was very much like you just described, where we were building the groups and building the trust, and so the groups got bigger and bigger. I've done something a little bit different, and I'd certainly be open to hear what anybody has to say about this. I really would. Is the way I've done what I'm doing now, and I've talked over 1,300 people this year in different venues and small groups and such. I always ask them at the end, I said, there's only one thing that I ask of you, and that is to go, look at your own circle of influence. And I said, now that I've met you today, you're within mine, right? And the back of the book has lots of different things that we've seen people do in Charleston to bring about a racial reckoning on a small scale, and ask people to look within their own area of influence and what is one thing that they think might be attainable. So that's sort of the approach that we've been taking, because this isn't some sort of ongoing facilitated process. It's a one-off. When they learn the story about the book, they get to see the art, they get to meet the artist, and then it's like, the polarity that I'm dealing with is acknowledge historical realities and consequences, and what is an action you can take today. And so I'd really be curious to hear what anybody else thinks about that. I mean, we've had some good things happen, but it's not the traditional group process that I worked with as a professional. So I'm sort of doing something different. I don't know if anybody's ever done that.
I think I feel so strongly about this in the context of, I don't think any of us who have been deeply involved in group process have done it, Margaret. But I think if you've been involved in a cohesive community, that you go back to the indigenous ways. And I have such a visceral response to this because it was how it was in South Africa. And that's where the most meaningful work that I've ever done was. And I was the outsider. I was the white person viewed as other, coming in with a boatload of money. And there was no trust. And I'm Auntie Carol. And when I come, the trust is incredible. But it was one little piece at a time. It took years. And most of us in change professionally aren't willing to take the time. And that's my sense of what this little secret, Skunk Works, etc., that Margaret ignited. Ryan and I have had some conversations, and we want to expand it. But look at who's in these squares.
Yeah, that's definitely what is coming through for me through being in many of the author jams and just hearing what each of you bring to the table. So for me, it's like this magical orchestra, I feel like, because for a couple reasons. So if I thread together some of the things that were talked about, Margaret, when you first came in and told us about your book and what you were doing, for me, it was about that thing that you're asking of them before they leave, right? So to Dave's point about, the time's up and, we're just going to go on. So what's that thing that they're going to do that, connects them? And I think that the way Ryan summarized it at one point was that you're asking the white folks to go first, right? Having the bravery to go first, and the black folks to have the grace to let them stumble and all of that. And so in my mind, that was where people are open to each other, right? And they learn, and they have a vested interest. And that's where I connect to Yesham, because at some point she had said, in some of the work that she does, that the people who were able to break through that wall were the mentors to two others that are just coming together and they have a conflict. You know what I mean? So they're the people that go from the 2 to a 4, and they're impacting there. And then in my mind, that connects to what Gil does with T groups, just that interpersonal connection and how, you know, his expertise. And then finally, could all these people come together in an open space that Ryan does and come up with the bigger solutions to, you know, make this move faster. And Patricia, I mean, I don't want to leave you out because you've done so much with the race relations in Minneapolis. So I just, like I said, I just see an orchestra here that, you know, we need whoever's the conductor to so anyways, that's just as the observer.
So as another observer, collectively, can we come up with a different metaphor? And it's more a jazz metaphor than a conductor, because conductor implies power again and one up. And I'm not criticizing you, Lisa. I'm looking at this as such an opportunity to change the structural conditions. And I think people in this room have been very effective in really being the conductor, but not publicly. And I think that's the real challenge, is to be an influencer. I'm seeing Margaret raise her hand, and I know, I mean, shake her head. Patricia is one of the most self-effacing, well, actually, I think everybody who's on this call to some extent is self-effacing. But what she and Craig did to have people every week start Monday mornings during COVID in order to create community, and what that has evolved into. How many years, Patricia? 5, right? 4, 5? You're on mute. 5 years. I mean, I couldn't do 6 o'clock in the morning anymore, but that was one of the most impactful experiences I've had in my personal life. So how do we create that in the appropriate way to go slow, to get bigger? And Patricia's had that experience. How many are in that group now, Patricia?
Regularly on Mondays between 20 and 40.
And when it was at its high, because people didn't have anything else to do and it was an important place to come? How
Yeah.
many were we?
Well, back then, 50, 60, 70, right.
And occasionally 100.
And occasionally 100, yeah.
So there's so
The fact that
much.
there are still 20 to 40 showing up every Monday morning is pretty remarkable. Yeah.
So I don't need to say any more. I think we have so much richness in this room, and that's what I was hoping we could rally around Margaret and really take her passion. She might think she feels the same way about the word passion, but she's passionate, and support it. I caused silence.
No, I was holding back because I wanted to jump in on the music metaphor, and I think there's a blend. Of course, there's a blend, because the way that we start as we convene together as jazz musicians, right? I want to jam with you one-on-one, or I want to experience what you're like, here. Let's get together, sometime, and let's have a gig. We're going to do a trio gig over here, and then maybe we'll do another trio. So we'll get a couple horn players, and then we'll be a quintet. And then by the time you get to about 7 or 8, then there's really a need to do more structured coordination. And I think by that time, then we're talking about when you get to a big band, you know, there's still a loose form, you have improvisation, but you need to have charts for a big band. And then when you get beyond that, right, then we're talking about, you know, wow, I don't know many jazz orchestras that are too much bigger than, I mean, maybe like a 30-piece jazz orchestra is huge. But then you've got the orchestra and then the opera and then scenes of like communities where you have stuff happening in many of these different sizes of these different size constellations in different venues with people of different class and status and needs. So I think in every community that, or each of our communities has a different scene, you know, and I think that's part of what I feel and what from what I hope that the part that I could play is to let's get the jazz scene together on this topic. You know, so we get to those groups of sevens, and then we get the sevens together, and we get to a larger scale to where we're all really hot and passionate about this theme, about this tune, you know, about this style and pattern of interaction. So that I think is the musical scaling of that. And I think for me, because that's my background, I just love to talk about it, and that's the book I'm writing, is about bringing that kind of change to groups where people start by really seeing and listening and understanding with each other, because we've got to do it on stage, you know. So like it's not one or the other. I think it's a both and those in the performing arts. It can be, it can't just doesn't have to be just jazz, because you know I love it. But we can talk about improv theater or moving to larger forms. So I've yeah, that's what I'm seeing again is this as the blend. And Lisa, you do have a wonderful idea. It's your idea plus my
Oh,
idea plus everyone. There's many. So
yeah.
I'm
Well,
complete. I'm incompletely complete. So.
and for me, just on the conductor part, maybe it's just been that I've been lucky that in any orchestra I've been in, they were more of a guide. They more knew all parts of the band, and you know, and putting folks together in those trios and stuff like that. So that's more of the sentiment that I have for a conductor, is that and we could swap in and out, right? Like I was a drum major, so I could become conductor in a certain, you know, so that's kind of the vein that I'm thinking of.
Well, I like the acknowledgement that there's structure and there's leadership. And, you know, you have any, I'm not the expert on jazz that you are, Ryan, but like Dave Brubeck, I love. And there was all kinds of improvisation, but there was structure. And so it wasn't just chaos. And at times it's probably great to just have sort of chaos happening to see what happens. But I don't think that the idea of leadership is something to run away from in wanting to create social change. It's important, and the leadership can come from anyone, you know, and so it's not that it's, you know, it has to be somebody who's sort of in a formal position of authority, but it can be. So I think one of the dilemmas, just like Dave was talking about in the social change community, is some aversion to the idea of authority and leadership. So one of the things I truly appreciate about Lewin is that he was certainly a leader, and he created all kinds of dialogue. And so he created space for people from all walks of society to influence and learn how to influence even more effectively. And so that's, I think it is one of those and/or things. But I think humans need, or at least it's certainly part of our history, including indigenous culture, to have some structure and some way of understanding how we do things and how we come together. And sometimes the structure is too much. It's like with the Aztecs, their structure was pretty hierarchical. And so not all indigenous cultures created what I would call a space I would want to be in. But certainly many did. And so there's much to be learned from that. I'd love to be in the world if it was just sort of like the indigenous cultures of North America had never been overcome by the more hierarchical culture of Europe. Probably be a better place to be, pretty sure. But anyway, it's one thing I worry about is rejecting the idea of authority, personal influence, or structural having a role of leading. I think it's a mistake. Though it's been abused so much in human history, it's easy to think that all hierarchy is bad.
Yeah, it's true. It has been abused. And I think of there's countries like Finland and Norway where there hadn't been much, and from my limited knowledge, importing of people as slaves or any of the things that started to make us as a country very diverse. And sometimes I think, boy, life must be simpler when everyone is of the same race and similar language and all of that. And then I think, but that's not who we are as a country. And often I hear in the political rhetoric, well, we're a nation of immigrants. And we are. And I wish that we would finally, as a nation, accept that as a very honorable thing. We are not a homogeneous population. We are diverse. And furthermore, we have a need, as those of us, all of us who teach creativity, we need diverse thought in order to break out of the muck, which, like right now, we're trying to figure out how do we break out. So maybe part of the future is start with a question. Think, someone mentioned this earlier in the call. Think of your genealogy, and look at your last names from the two families that are united in the marriage of your parents. Trace them to their national roots, and you'll find out that this country and even the rural samples of this country touch every part of the globe. And why don't we look at that as a tremendous resource for all manner of change, and stop trying to push a whole population of the country out of the game, if you will, and put them on sidelines. I stayed up and watched that debate, and that guy Vance, who that's not really his name, he has tried several names, but he repeated illegal alien about I lost count. What was he really saying? People who are brown and black. This illegal alien, that's who he's talking about. And they're coming, and look at the Haitians and how they picked on them. It's just, we should draw a line as a nation and say, okay, enough is enough. Let's try a new way to figure out how what each person brings to the table. But skin color which goes back to my rant earlier about my African American colleagues. Skin color barely predicts anything except as a means of separating people. And maybe it's those of us whose skin is pale and white have to be the ones to lead to say, boy, do I admire people who aren't white. You know, stop thinking we have the advantage because of what's covering our body and called skin. Let's get deeper. So I'm just ranting. I was so bothered by that. Well, not only the debate this week, but also the revelations of the John Smith's committee, and the judge released the disgusting behavior of a person who supposedly tied with Harris. And what is going on with this country? Except one thing: the people who are holding on tight to Trump, not to him as a person, but to be not on the other side of things. They don't want brown, black people who speak second languages. They don't want any of that in their lives. And this is a standoff because the national population is going to be much more majority non-white than white within the next year or so. So we'll see. We only got 30 days before we find out what kind of country we're going to be living in.
Thanks, Dave. I know that if several had to leave at the top of the hour, so any final thoughts here? Next steps. I'm happy to be involved and keep us moving forward with your discussion. So kind of a checkout if you have thoughts.
Go ahead, Margaret. I was hoping.
I'm really glad to learn about what Patricia is doing. So I want to look into that. And anyway, I just appreciate everybody's time and support. So I really, and Lisa, you do the best big listening checks of anybody I've ever met in terms of being able to weave everybody together. I just thought that was brilliant. So I want to acknowledge that.
Great job, Lisa.
Well, and Patricia, for her, if she was, I wish she was still here. Just her description of that gentleman that said he felt seen. Do you remember that, Dave? She created a space, and he was I think he was 70 or 80, and he was a black fellow who had said it was the first group he ever felt seen in. And I just thought of her impact in that way across anything like this. I just didn't have my example ready. So
good one. Yeah.
And Margaret, I was going to send it to you, but I'll tell you, Patricia is one of the author jam people who's in NCDD, and so is Rosa. So I have that list. And Lisa, that might be something we could reach out and maybe have a separate author jam or encourage them, because Margaret is, and Gil, you might have some ideas about this. Margaret is actually looking for collaborative partners. And that's an interesting challenge, but I think we have enough of a network that we might collectively brainstorm that and come up with some to explore.
Well, that sounds like a worthy thing. And I'm just thinking, Margaret, I don't know you. I've only met you in this call, but I do podcasts. I did a podcast with Rosa about the work she's been doing on democracy and the work she's witnessed in Austria. around communities, being more influential of what happens in their own community. So some pretty cool stuff, but I would love to do a podcast interview of you about.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
you, sir.
cool. So then I just need to know how to get a hold of you.
Okay. Well, Lisa, can you do that? Can you share our emails? Thanks.
Yeah, I can connect you. Absolutely.
Thanks. Oh, that's a
Great.
great honor. Thank you. Yes.
Well, it'd be an
And
honor for
I
me
mean-
too.
And
Thank you.
Dave has almost 300 people in his podcast, so you definitely should be on Dave's podcast. I told you that the other day, his is all about practice. And if somebody doesn't have a practice, it's not you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very true. It's funny,
So-
it occurred to me that the authoring that brought us together is contained in something called the Collaborative Change Library. It's a bit of a wow, but it could be collaborative exchange authors as well. In other words,
Wow.
why don't we look at this amazing group? There's quite a few who haven't appeared on these calls. We've just ran down through the roster, and Carol knows them all very well. There's a lot of people who probably are a little bit feeling isolated and have that sense that, hey, I'm more than a writer. I'm more than someone who puts words on paper. I wrote because I have a feeling of cause, and I want to move. I want to see change happen. So I don't know. Someday we might be able to tap the talent base of the Collaborative Change Library authors a little bit more. But this is a start.
Yeah, the authors, and then in my mind, it's like how many of these folks coming in the think tank series would,
Yeah.
be members of the Army.
Well, we're all interested in seeing things work out better
Orchestra.
in the world than they are working right now. And
Well, and this topic is universal on some level.
Yeah.
So that's never happened before. It's just evolved.
yeah,
But partially because of the political situation all over the world.
yeah,
I
Yeah.
don't think anybody isn't touched by this. And I think Margaret has stepped up to ignite it.
Yeah.
Also, Lisa, this might be something that if you're interested, you could convene, because this idea of local then moving to global would be a wonderful start. So everybody comes with where they're coming from locally.
Mhm. Right. Yep, we
Yeah.
could talk more about that and see where we can thread that in. Absolutely.
Well,
So,
I
thank you,
too
everyone.
have to go, but
Yep.
this has been stimulating, no
Now I
surprise.
gotta figure out what's wrong with my computer.
Good luck with that.
I'll come visit, Dave. I'll help.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Lisa.
Someone from your
Dave
staff.
and Gil, I look
everyone.
forward to hearing from
Thank you, Gil.
Yes,
Bye,
look,
Margaret.
I'll be in
Carol,
touch.
thank you. Lisa,
Margaret.
awesome.
Bye.
Awesome.
Okay,
Carol.
take
Bye, y'all.
care.
Take care now.
Bye-bye.